I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So Jeff, so you want the motion?
I'll take the president and so forth. Larry.
Here.
Kelly.
Kelly, are you here?
Kelly, are you
Here.
Dr. Lindsay.
Here.
Andy.
Here.
Nate.
Here.
Dr. Dunn will be absent, and I am here. So, I'd like to open it up to the citizens. Is there any comments anybody would like to? Did anybody sign up yet, Joelle?
No one signed up.
So, before you just start speaking, if somebody's got their hand up, let's let them go first. Somebody want to say anything?
Don't be the first, don't be the last.
Let's just go around the room and some of that, well, everybody speak, to say what's on your mind, good or bad.
Just tell us who you are, in case somebody doesn't know yet. Quinn, you got something to say?
I got nothing right now, just here to listen.
Nobody? Okay, then I'm gonna open up to the board. What kind of characteristics do you guys want to look at? And/or what kind of comments do we have? If we don't get a comment with, it might be a short meeting.
Yeah, we're here for the public, we're here to listen to the public, so we want to hear what you have to say, what kind of attributes, or how you,
Absolutely.
anything.
I have a question.
Sure.
Could you lay out what you foresee this process to look like? The steps when you're looking to do interviews, who you're going to involve?
It's not gotten that far because we haven't decided how we're going to vet a new person yet. So the vetting process can be done through a headhunter, through WASB, and there's also another option. So that's something that the board needs to discuss. And when I say vet, it's very important that you understand what someone else does as a vetting process, not just us as a board. When you hire someone, they vet their credentials. Not only that, they vet their recommendations, but they also go outside of their recommendations and they vet them like the FBI would vet someone if you were going to work for the government. So they try to get the best picture that they can. Now, what they also need to know in that process is what kind of qualifications we're looking for. If someone's strong in business, if they're strong in curriculum, or or have a list of those things and do what we think is most important down to the least, but we include all those things, and those are the things that we need from the public. What do you feel is important in a new superintendent? So right now we have, we put that out there. We have to make that public, so we chose to do that and made that public. So there are, how many applications, Jeff?
Well, as of this morning, we have 9.
So that was just us on our own, but personally I feel that as a board we cannot vet them like someone else would. That's why we're looking for what the community wants to see in a new superintendent and a new leader. I mean, all of us have our own thoughts, but it's your school too. Does that make sense?
I have a question about that. Have we ever done that before?
No, and it's problematic. What's important that I feel, I'm going to give you my argument. I think someone outside can do a broader search. WASB does a Wisconsin search. What happens is that it's a pretty small pool of superintendents at times, and somebody knows somebody who knows somebody, and I'm not sure that that's always the best way. to do that. I think it needs to be someone, looked at everyone to see if there's someone out there that has something, you know, that's in our criteria. I'm not saying that that may not be within our scope, but this is a really important decision, and I feel that as how schools are run now, that they're seen as businesses, but they're also not, they have to be run like a business, but they're not a profitable business. So there's a lot more involved than there used to be.
I have 2 questions.
Yeah.
So one question is, I know, I'm Jody Renwick, people don't know me. Budget has been a huge issue lately when making decisions as a board. Vetting, having someone vet makes me think dollar signs. Is there a plan for where that money would come from?
We haven't decided if that's gonna happen. And I'm gonna,
Does Dr. Lindsay, he's nodding at me, I wonder if he has something to
Well,
say.
we heard some costs thrown out, did we, Kelly? Someone said $7,500 was one firm's cost, and we didn't decide on spending the money
no.
so far.
And we haven't, yeah.
You're right, there is cost with vetting.
There is cost with that.
Second question.
Yes.
Is if this process, I don't know how to word this, so I know it would be ideal to have a superintendent by the start of the school year. I don't know if that's logical or if that would happen. So I wonder if the board's thought of what's going to happen if we don't have a candidate by the start of the school year.
An interim
Anybody?
superintendent.
Yeah, we've discussed interim, right?
We discussed
And
interim,
we've discussed
yeah.
using our presence principals.
Yeah.
We've discussed new hire, we've kind of talked through all the different options.
After,
We're
Go
going,
ahead.
we're going to actually put on the agenda for next week. Because frankly, my view is we need an interim. This is way too short a notice. The pool isn't going to be big enough as far as I'm concerned. And it's just a question of whether we're going to try to do something internally or whether we're going to bring somebody in from the outside. That would buy us a year, and then we can properly do the steps, because frankly, for us to think that we're going to have somebody in place, a brand new superintendent for the start of the school year is unrealistic. It's just not there. But that's me personally talking.
and there are 2 other schools in the area that probably, I think Beloit just got an interim one for a year. Twin Lakes just got one recently. So it happens. It does cost money. Who those people are retired superintendents. So they've been around a while. I'm just putting it out there, who, you know, if that were to happen, that's who those people are.
Is there somebody within our current district right now that has the qualifications that can do the intern position?
Yes.
Who is that?
Mitch Wainwright.
Okay.
He's actually got a license. And technically, Matt is also eligible because he could get an emergency license because he starts his program in the fall.
Okay.
We want to know, we're deciding that as we speak and we listen to you, but we also need to know who you're looking for long-term, because this is a long game too, not just a short game. Mary Jean?
Mary Jean James, for those who don't know, I'm not surprised. I guess referring to her comment about hiring someone else to do the hiring, I'm concerned about the cost, of course, and I think, of course, I don't know a lot about doing it that way. As far as I know, it has not been done in the past. I think we have a very qualified board that would be able to take care of this process. So I know it's Kelly's thought, I don't know, and you don't have to say anything one way or the other. I'm just wondering what if the rest of you feel that way, or, you know, or if you're satisfied with yourselves to do this on your own, or with community, I don't know what your other plans would be as far as But anyway, I would like to see it done
In-house?
in our community, not with someone from outside.
Anybody want to answer that?
I strongly advise against that. I think that if we want to maintain number 2, rural district, number 2 status, then I think our search has to be vigorous, and we need experts. We're not experts.
But you're also aware of the local community and how our school district runs, and just, you know, the whole gamut. And I guess, and I understand there's professionals in every occupation, and I guess I would think if the board feels comfortable, outside of Kelly, that doing that,
I feel comfortable, Mary Jean, about it. I don't think it's the best thing to do, and I think that this is a common theme among our, in our district, is that once an outsider comes in, you know, then everything's like, you know.
well, I wouldn't
I mean-
look at it that way, because they're professionals and they would deal with this type of thing all the time. But anyway, I just would like to see it done.
And I don't like that term outsider, because
Yeah.
that gets thrown out a lot.
Sure, I
You know,
understand.
it got thrown out a lot when we were considering who to do construction work, and that makes us kind of like, you know, cloistered or something, like we
Yeah.
can't have outsiders here, so.
Yeah.
It's a lot bigger world out there than just us, and a lot bigger perspectives.
We're also a small community though. And
And people deal with
sometimes when you're reaching somebody from New York or Miami or wherever we are looking at vetting somebody from, I think there might be a clash of values. And I think that's the foundation and the mission of the school and our district. So I think that's kind of a concern when we talk about vetting, is in the business world, it's bigger, broader, looking at somewhere else. I mean, we're not just looking at someone in Belmont.
And I'm not talking about New York or Miami, I'm talking about someone with a broader scope than maybe Southwest Wisconsin. There's a lot of candidates in Wisconsin, and I'm not against Mitch, but I think that there's the competitiveness of that, then we have a selection.
I have a question. So I'm Lynn Ross, I teach at the elementary. So if we have, okay, so you're talking about vetting people, and they could still be somebody from Wisconsin. So does the vetting process then go to people who are current superintendents who aren't necessarily looking for a position? Because I thought we posted it on Weekend, and then people who were looking for jobs could then apply. So why do the vetting when we could maybe start with the Weekend?
We have to post it publicly, number one. Number two, if we decide to hire short-term, we had a pool. If we vet, that would be for a year from now. So that vetting process would start after the first of the year. Did that answer that? There's two things here. If we have someone, there's 3 choices here. There's Mitch, there's the 9 candidates,
You're mad.
Matt, so there's 9 candidates who could be permanent. There's also the vetting of an interim other than Mitch. And then there's, if we vetted the interim, then they would be here for a year, and then we would vet again for the long term. So there could be 2 vetting processes, and what I'm hearing everyone saying, and I think Jeff's against it, of the short-term vetting.
I would prefer we didn't spend all our time on the question of vetting, but more on the question of what you'd like in a superintendent. It hasn't been decided that we're gonna vet. But what as teachers and public do you want to see lead the school is the reason for the meeting. And I think that's where we need important input as to what kind of individual do you want in charge of the Mineral Point School District? However they're chosen.
I'm Amanda Heisner. I'll just say that since I've been here for 2 years in Monroe Point, I've really appreciated having a leader who can empower a staff. And so I know like a good leader is like a generic word, but I really, I think someone who understands systems is great, but I also think somebody who understands how classrooms work and how teachers work, who can help to continue to motivate and empower a staff. One of the things that I think makes Monroe Point really unique is you have a really invested staff. You have staff who spend time each week talking about places where they can work together and learn more and try to continue to make improvements. And that, I think, brings you teachers who want to continue to grow. So whatever great words summarize that. I don't really have those, I guess, but you know, somebody who has worked with staff, who can work to reach consensus, who can work to move things forward. Somebody who can take action, I think, is good.
Go ahead.
Julie Campos, I'm the district nurse. I think initially we need to find somebody that is committed to our mission and vision statements, and then from there to move forward, because that is actually the basis and the framework of this entire district. And I think it's important to have somebody, like Amanda said, with a pedagogical background, and then also has, you know, business acumen, and somebody who has actually managed dollars, considering, you know, how the state funding systems work. And again, that, you know, is able to be an overseer, yet hands-off, and allow people to function autonomously and do what we have been hired to do in the district.
Thank you.
Are you catching all this?
Trying.
Any other attributes you want?
I'd like someone invested in our community who lives here.
That, legally can't do that.
Require legally.
I'm not saying it required, but I think that's something that could be listed as encouragements, that to have somebody that's in, I'm not saying, you know,
That's part of the negotiation, but we can't legally say that.
okay.
We will say encouraged to be part of the community.
And we
It
have
just
to-
would be nice instead of having someone attend events and things that are going on, you know, more than just after a board meeting.
Yeah.
And I hear you, and we have to say legally can't do that, but that message has been loud and clear from everyone that I've talked to, so we get it.
Well, I had to bring it up then.
I think one thing to bear in mind too is the average span of a tenure of a superintendent is 3 years.
After
So,
their degrees
yeah.
before.
I
no,
thought
no,
it was
in a
4.
district,
I thought it was 4.
it may be 4 now, but it's very short.
Short.
So to ask someone to pick up, you know what I mean, it's a bit of a gamble in terms of moving here, you just, for that reason, that's all. Just, I'm not saying I disagree with you, it's just from perspective, I think.
I think there's been a lot of time and energy and money spent to get us to this point. And I would be very disappointed if somebody new came in and wanted to take the staff and the district in a different direction. I think that would probably do more harm than good as far as what's the impact on students.
Let's talk about that, Mitch. Where are we? So some of you have been around longer than I have been as far as on the school board, teaching in this district. Let's just go back 10 years. Where are we at compared to 10 years ago? Would we all think we're better? Chris?
I would agree completely, and we are on a path. Working in this district is amazing. Our leadership gives us the opportunities to dig deep into our field and come up with new ideas and actually be like action research and doing these things, and to change course now, it's really kind of frightening. And I just feel like there's such commitment and there's such.
That's one of my biggest fears. I would hate to see this district lapse back.
I mean, and I feel like you have people that love what they do and they dig
Right.
deep and they, I mean, if you walk around these halls at the end of the day or on the weekend or in the summer, or these aren't people that just work the school year or work the clock at that. I mean, so just somebody that continues that momentum, knows who we are, knows where we're going, and gives people that opportunity to thrive in their role. Because like Julie said, we do great things when we all feel respected and honored and safe enough to try something new, because this is different than last year, but you know, I've been learning and I really want to try this with kids.
Did our previous superintendent give you goals and directions, or would you seek him out and then say?
I talk to him a lot with my
I didn't know how
program.
that worked.
But I also am always in I'm in like Quinn's room. I mean, like the collaborative spirit here is so huge.
But technology's been a huge thing, so you've been a part of that technology.
Yeah, but I would say I'm
everybody.
technology, but I don't even think it's necessarily, technology is a huge part in my role, but I think it's bigger. It's like literacy and learning. It's just learning in general. Like, okay, we have these kids, how can we push them forward? Or I came across this idea, it doesn't fit for my program, but hey Quinn, you should try this, or
I'm just
you know.
curious, is that teacher motivated, or was it superintendent motivated, or how
I
is
think
that?
it's just the team. It's
Oh,
like
okay.
that, you
More
know,
of a
like you
team
feel
approach.
that you can do that. So you're always going outside your box, and you're always like knocking on, I'm sorry Mitch, I'm always like, hey, you got a minute? Like, we could try, you know, I don't know, but somebody else jump in, because
I think that's part of the PLC process that we
yeah.
have been taken on, you know, like, we just have been working so collaboratively,
Yes.
building-wide and district-wide, not just within our buildings. I mean, we communicate across the whole PK-12, and I think that is in part a lot due to Luke. I mean, he pushed us on that PLC path, and it was hard at first, but I feel like we're finally getting where we want to be and where we're comfortable at. And
Would he have you together as groups then? I mean, I really don't know the dynamics
well,
there.
our Wednesday afternoons were a lot of that. Was
In
our,
middle school, high school, we're all in the same space,
Yeah.
and so you can be bouncing to the next
and it was hard. I mean, it was a hard journey. It was not an easy thing, but over the past 7 years, he has taken us this far, and we are where
Some
we
had to be
are.
halter broke, I take it to.
Yeah, I mean, it was hard. it was a hard
Well,
path.
But
to
I
be
also
taken
think
on,
we hit a
but-
wall, and we're $300,000, and you guys have no money for your classrooms. So we need someone who's really business savvy.
I
But
got
I
a
don't
comment on
feel
that.
that
I
that
don't
was-
blame Luke on that, I blame
No.
the state for lacking
Right.
funding with education personally. You know, and also, as I told the previous board, you left us with a debt, at least when I came on, which caused a few to be upset. But the debt was really created by the state. Does anybody disagree?
No.
Yeah, I disagree with that.
You disagree with that?
Yeah.
The
I'm not
state
gonna
did
answer,
create-
you can have pose a question, I don't have to answer.
No, you don't have to answer, but I think the state created the deficit. I mean, that's really where
Do you think the PLC program, or again, is kind of the foundation of the school success? And would you use?
I think it's an important part of it.
I
I
do
don't
too.
know that everybody would agree with me, but I think, at least from an elementary standpoint, I think we are where we are because
If
we
you look-
pushed really hard to get there.
If you look at some of the report card data, and I don't only know the elementary, but if you look at things like closing the gap and growth, things that, you know, I'm sure you see that at all levels, that's really increased over the years, and that's just teachers are working smarter. And those PLC times once a week where they're not waiting for a kid to, you know, not be successful, but they're being proactive and just saying, we need to get this kid with this teacher, teaching this strategy. You know, and then actually PLCs happen every day, and they're switching kids daily, so, you know, I would, so to your point, just piggybacking off you, it's.
So PLCs are important, and the movement forward with collaboration and innovation. I mean, we need specific words.
Well, I think both of those are there. I don't think, whoever the next superintendent's gonna be, PLC will be part of it, and it's a whole collaboration.
But I think the important thing to know is, anybody can say, oh yeah, I did PLCs. But I think to know how we do our PLCs is important. And I think that's when you say the word vetting worries me, because if you,
It shouldn't. Let me explain what part of the vetting process that I learned. So if we have WASB vet, what WASB will do is come and talk to all the teachers and get their perspective on what they want. They meet separately with support staff, they meet with the board, and they meet with the community. So all voices are heard. So to say that your voice will not be heard, that's not how the process is. So you would be able to speak to that person who's vetting and tell them. And then they narrow down it, and they give it to us, and they give it to you, and we all agree on what we need to look for. So, I know you're really proud of your PLC, but then you have to explain what your PLC and how you move forward with that, and how you want someone to lead us with that. So, you will not be heard during that vetting process.
I have a question. Kelly, I'm Bobby Jones, parent. Can't we do that with a survey monkey? Survey of staff, survey of the community?
I really think, I'm probably more of an advocate than anybody else here. I'm only one voice. If the rest of the board wants to put me down, that's fine. But I really think we need a professional to come in and do the long-term search. I think that benefits everyone. If it cost us $9,000, we just spent $13,000 on the grade school, and now we're talking about tearing out what we just did for a new entrance eventually. That was bad money spent. So I think sometimes money needs to be spent for a long-term goal and a good leader. That's not always the wrong thing to do.
Okay, but how much would it cost us to have our communications director do a survey of the community and a survey of the staff? I just know that it's hard to come to these meetings and speak up. And when you can sit behind your screen, you can be totally honest. When you're
Look how many
totally
people showed up
anonymous.
tonight.
This is a good turnout.
Yeah. And we're just we're preliminary.
But there are people who can't come to meetings if it conflicts with their work schedule or if they can't get childcare. I mean, I'm just curious how much it would cost. Does it cost $500 to do a survey? Thousands? Well, we've done them before. We did one for the calendar.
Couple thousand, I would say, conservatively. Most of that's postage costs.
No, well, what if we just did it online?
You wouldn't
Would get everyone
give them,
basically.
I would not recommend that with our community. There's a large enough base of people that rely on paper communication.
So the calendar one was done through snail mail too?
No. The big ones are done through snail mail. The biggest one being the elementary school bank.
Well, could we do one online and then start with that information before we made the decision to hire an outside source? Because then at least you could give that information to the outside source and not duplicate the time and money and effort.
I'll do whatever the board tells me to do,
I have to say I have another attribute whenever we're ready for that. Well, personally and professionally, I would really like somebody, and I know again, this is something that's really easy to say, but I would like somebody who believes that all kids can be successful. In my role, I have the opportunity to really work with kids on all, ends of the spectrum that kids come with, and I think I really want somebody who has some experience or who is willing to take some risks for kids and willing to make sure that that commitment to the things that kids need is there.
I'd like to give that a big Second. John will give it
I'll say one that's probably gonna come up, just because it comes up in every job search, it seems, but I think it's extra important, is we need a good communicator in this role in all facets. I'm not saying that selfishly for my needs, I'm saying it because it's not just up to me to communicate to the community, it's a whole team-wide effort that needs to come top down, so.
Well, it's going to be especially important with all ages. If we're looking at possibly moving to a referendum, it's going to be a high percentage of elderly that that person's going to have to be able to communicate with and have them understand the needs of the school district. It's going to be huge. Otherwise, I'm very fearful that the referendum would not pass if we don't get that sector going forward. Well said.
Let's switch the discussion to the position itself. I mean, we're all talking about a conventional superintendent like we've had and we've always had in the past. Is there, let's just discuss it for 5 minutes. Sharing a superintendent, recreating a job within, principal, superintendent. We'll start with Mitch and Matt. Is that even possible to
Share a business manager?
share a business manager, and maybe share a superintendent between the two of you? Just throwing it out there.
What do you think, Mitch?
You're so collaborative. You're so collaborative.
Toss the ball.
And I think anything's possible. However, I would see it 22 years ago, walking in the front door and an angry wife and an upset child, and you walk in and who gets to you first? You know, the child gets to you first to tell their side of the story, and then you might be a little more sympathetic there than you would be to the spouse. And if the spouse gets to you first, well, then the child's in the doghouse. Two people kind of serving in that same role. If they don't get the answer from Matt they want, they might come to me to get the answer, and or vice versa. I don't know how that would work, you know, in a district. It's not a practice I've ever been a part of at any school I've ever worked in.
I'm impressed you haven't had to have that discussion for 22 years.
I just stay at school longer.
I think with the strategic plan that we have now adopted, I mean, I think that's part of it, is talking about rethinking roles and rethinking how schools work. You know, we are just at the very beginnings of this though. So I kind of share Mitch's hesitation with this. I have no idea how that would look or work. You know, who takes what, and I would just say selfishly, you know, I think the elementary schools had how many principals before me in the last 10 years? 6.
Something like that.
So that's something else to consider, is that there's been a lot of turnover in my current position, and you know, I'm committed to that role, and I think we're on a good path within our PLCs with literacy, and so I mean that's just something to consider too.
I'm going to say something coming from a district that was of course larger. The superintendent was one job, and then all the jobs that our past superintendent has had were different positions. There was a business manager, there was HR. So already asking one person to do the job of what we've done, had as a superintendent, but then asking them, do you know what I'm trying to say? Asking them to be a principal and a superintendent when a superintendent is already wearing 5 hats is stretching a person really thin, I think. Did that make sense?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Has the board compared our district to other districts of the same size to look to see what they have as far as administration? Looked at other school districts with 700
I have,
students.
and they don't have as many administrators as we have. The ones that I looked at anyway, Bobby Joe.
So that's a good question. Do they have shared responsibilities or do they
Yes.
split? Do they have 2 principals or 3 principals? How
Well,
are
the
they
ones-
different?
The couple, 2 or 3 that I looked at, there was like a principal, for example, and one principal would do the AD, and then another one, there was a principal, business manager. I mean, it could be any realm of any possibilities out there, so it's kind of hard to really, specifically say, oh yeah. I just, personally, I think we're very top-heavy in this district, and have been for a number of years.
Can we look within our own staff? We have more than one, I'm gonna guess about 6 to 10 teachers who have principal license or director of pupil service license that could possibly take on extra duties for extra pay.
I
great
have a
idea.
list of each other, I don't know if it was that many.
And we have
I'm not
almost,
sure.
all of our teachers have master's degrees, right?
I think it's important when we compare ourselves to other districts too, that we're also comparing ranking, like, we're the number 2 district in the state, right? So where do they fall when they start sharing services? I'd just be curious to know that as well.
I didn't look at that, honestly.
Okay, no, I mean, it just, in the future, I think when we're making,
That's a good idea.
yeah.
And it was said, I can't remember who said it, about having a good business sense, knowing how to handle money, and having experience with that, the money associated with schools. A possible, Mitch and Matt, possible scenario would be rolling somebody with a business background you assume some curriculum responsibilities as a superintendent. Same with you and your building, man. That's what I was getting at. I'm not saying that, to assume the whole responsibility of a superintendent. And if there's any chance that it could work, worth trying, if we're going to do an interim, now's the time to do it before we go through the process of hiring a conventional superintendent, if it's worth a try. And if it will not work, it won't work. I'm not saying we need to do something that's going to jeopardize the school. But if it's a possibility, and I don't have an answer tonight, of course.
In the,
Something to think about. Go ahead, Mary Jo.
in the past, we had a business administrator. And so was Luke the superintendent and the business administrator both?
Right. HR.
Who was the last business administrator we had in Mary Jo? I was waiting for
Mark Hansen.
Mark.
Yeah, it's been a long
It's been a long
time. Yeah.
Well, we were way ahead of the
Was he
game
the-
then.
Huh?
We were way ahead of the curve then.
Was he
Was-
principal also?
Middle school.
Middle school principal.
Was that the last, and he was the principal and business administrator at the same time. And that's the last time that we had a business administrator per se?
Correct.
And he was the, what principal, what level?
Middle school.
Middle school.
Okay.
As far as I'm concerned, Mary Jean, we've had a business administrator ever since Mark. She was trained by Mark Hansen, and she's as good as any business manager is out there. I think the problem here is that the board has never asked her to come to board meetings to be able to ask her questions.
Right?
Marcia takes a back seat to nobody.
No, she doesn't.
That's me personally talking again.
But you were told by the audit company about Marcia, how good she is. State that.
What she
You know?
said.
No, but say what they said.
Of all the schools in the area, our books are as clean and as almost pristine in comparison to any other school district. To look for a business manager would be silly in my mind, when we have really probably the best one in the area as it is, and probably the most underpaid person we have on the staff. So,
So that comes back to my my question, Jeff, if we're looking within our district at existing staff and their certifications and their qualifications, can we rearrange the roles?
I think you hit the nail on the head, and I personally 100% agree with you. And I think our problem here is that I may have blew this because frankly, we want to just get some public input tonight. And we do have a closed session scheduled because we are going to talk to an individual. Personally, I think we should do an interim, 1 year. That gives us the time to really decide if the person we name as an interim superintendent can handle the job and keep us on the path that we want to go. Because, I mean, frankly, we're number 2, and I'm sure there's nobody in this room wants to see us go to number 3 or number 10. So, I personally believe that we have a lot of well-qualified internal candidates, whether for superintendent or principal or whatever we're really looking for. But again, that is just me talking, not the board.
Yeah. I've asked Jeff to make sure that's on next Monday's agenda, the interim options versus the search options. And we'll have an opportunity, because it will be an action item at that point, to speak more in depth back to you. There's a lot of things that we've kind of said generically that I think we're all thinking. So the input is great. We'll obviously keep it in mind for next Monday.
Well,
To be able to
Honestly,
respond directly.
the only reason we posted was we were advised by Luke and frankly the WASB attorney that I talked to that it was still early enough that if you want to try to get a pool of candidates, you need to do it immediately, which is, I mean, Luke did it last Monday morning, right at 7 o'clock when we were doing this. And frankly, I don't think 9 candidates is enough for a school system like this. So I'm even more strong-minded that I want an interim and buy us some time, so.
And we would be the first school that put that out there on weekend and then not act on it. So that's, that's not, not a, we didn't lose anything.
Well, I think it's only fair that you posted it. I would expect that with any position that opens in our district, because you never know, there might be somebody fantastic out there. But I also think that you as a board need to realize that your existing staff will put our kids first. And if you bring in a new candidate, you can't be assured of that. So I think you have the advantage of looking at what you have, and if we try that for a year, what's the worst that can happen? Could be great things can happen, because you have great staff and you have great parents. And we're not gonna sit by and let you slide, believe me.
Do you guys have any idea, when you throw the interim out there, do you have any idea what that would look like? Because either one of these guys that go interim would be crazy. If you didn't like what they did, where do they go after that? Do they go to their old job, or are they out of a job? You know, that's just one bad year of testing though. I mean, that has nothing to do with either one of them. It could be, a bad class that didn't do good on a test. We dropped to number 3, and we look at those things.
I don't think that data or that number 2 had anything to do with any unhappiness of an administrator, okay?
Okay.
All right, so there's a lot of other qualities that we need in a leadership in the school. So that's that's a scenario that if it happens, I mean, that's like hiring a new basketball coach for the UW and then he has a bad year and you don't give him the next year.
Right,
I
agree.
I mean, all those things have to be taken into account. But, I mean, I know that data and that number 2 is really, really important. But there's a whole other scope of things that I think that we need in a leader too. Okay, and I think I know that the staff, I'm listening to the staff here, but there's a lot of parents and a lot of input that have been given to all of us. So, I think everything's great. we have to discuss this as a board, and we're listening,
Okay.
okay?
Yeah, I was
We're-
just
I mean,
seeing if
we're
you
gonna
had a
do-
plan for the interim,
I
what
think how
happened.
Well, we-
how that would look.
Right.
Right, no, that's
Actually,
what,
I think that's part of next week's action.
Okay.
yeah, and we're gonna discuss that tonight too.
Okay.
So we haven't even had the time to discuss that. I wanted to have a personnel committee so we could discuss all of that, and they wanted to go to this right away. So we're kind of putting the cart before the horse again, which often happens here. And so now we kind of have to pull back again and discuss as a board.
Okay, so let's pull us back a little bit. We've kind of heard from the public, and if you guys still have something, we'll still listen, but everybody knows where I stand. What's your thoughts? I'm gonna go around the table. I wanna know what each one is thinking, because that way the public will know where we're leaning. Larry? Are you in favor of going interim, or do you wanna continue the process, or what's your thoughts? You don't wanna go first?
I think being this late in the year, the last thing I want to do is make a decision, make the wrong one. Interim is a safer path. But with that said, again, I don't want to see our school flutter. We've got too much invested, we've come too far. And I'm not even going to mention our ranking, and that doesn't really matter to me.
Okay.
I want to see our student population come out of this school with the best education, experience, college readiness, whatever you want, however you want to explain it, describe it, possible. With an emphasis on business. I think that's where not only our school lags, it's rural schools in general. With this path we're on, this rate of expenses will not, it cannot last.
I agree.
And I'm not saying business managers want to have all the right answers or the perfect answers.
But they got their eye on the ball all the time.
I think there's more options out there than even we've explored. Example, grants.
You're talking about funding.
Funding options.
I agree with you totally.
And really, when it comes to curriculum, the building principals and all these great teachers, they're really in charge of that themselves.
Anything else? Kelly?
I'm okay with an interim. I'm okay with an in-house interim, but I don't think that person should be guaranteed future employment. I think that we do the search after that.
Okay. Anything else? I guess that's all.
That's it.
Doc?
I'm for an interim unless we flesh out some fantastic candidate, but I think an interim is the best way to go. I also looked up our state report card. Our state funding has dropped 11% over the last 4 years for schools, so just so that is out there.
Unfortunately, Doc, most of that is because of the number of kids that we've lost over the last few years.
That's part of it too.
And we do have more kids opt in than out, but we only get 2/3.
Yeah, but I'm just talking about overall state funding. When I looked up the state report card, it's dropped 11%. So, I mean, there's shrinking funds, so we're gonna have to have somebody sharp with business, that's for sure.
Okay.
And another reason for that, you might have to help me, Jeff, is the less we spend, the less we get.
That's true, isn't it crazy?
Yeah, it is. It's
That's,
State is
corporate
really
America's the same way.
backwards.
You lose
Same way
your
the
budget-
township.
Yeah,
Unless-
you
if
lose
you
your
don't
budget if
spend
you
the
don't
money,
spend it.
you won't even get that.
Yeah, so they want us to go out and tax our property owners,
Mhm.
so we can get more money from them.
Yeah.
It's just.
The more efficient you are, the more you're punished. Oh, this is smart.
I'm sorry, Doc, were you done? Or-
I'm done.
Okay. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
Well, the action that I plan on proposing, if it was on the agenda tonight, but next week, is looking at an interim amongst multiple staff members, spreading out duties, looking at our entire administration and maybe some support staff, so that we're not in a position a year from now, like Quinn alluded to, if year one does not go well for whoever we hired internally for that we have to fire somebody. Whether we move one person and we fill their spot and then we fill that person's spot. If we don't hire the interim, in a year from now, somebody loses their job if we just move people. So I'd like us to look at it, the whole
I
picture.
agree with that. Last thing I want to do too is hire 3 more people for this interim position.
And I think we have the resources
Okay.
in the district to do it. You know, and then that gives us, with the intent, my action was going to be to post again in December. And then we as a board would need to decide if we think, like people here do, that we're capable of handling this process ourselves, which would give us time to determine that, is set up the process, how does it look? This is going to be too much for us, we need to bring somebody in, we don't know enough, or no, this is what people have hired us to do, or
With
not
that,
hired
with
for
that,
very
would
much
we,
money.
would we
Elected
regularly
us
meet
to
with
do.
those people here as a board? And, you know, under this scenario, would we have them come report to us each month then, or?
Well, I think anybody carrying, I mean, and again, this is just
Yeah.
potential action for next week, anybody
Right.
carrying those duties, I think, would need to be
Mhm.
part of
The board
the
meetings.
board meetings,
Yeah,
the
gotcha.
superintendent panel, if you will.
Mhm.
And however we decide to divide it up, I think we're all aware of the different hats that Luke wore and how those need to be filled. So that's where I'm at for a week from now.
I agree with Andy on that. I'm completely in favor of an interim internally, because they know how everything works already, especially, like we've said, this late in the year with short notice. With all the things we have already on paper, you know, with the possibility of the referendum and all the renovations at this school. And I, like Quinn said too, and Andy said, it would be horrible to have to fire somebody if we did fill a position, moving everybody up. So hopefully we give an internal candidate interim for a year, and they shine, and we just go right through and we don't have to go through that whole process. Would be my hopes, I guess. Hopefully that duty can be passed on internally.
Okay. Any other public comment? Now that you've kind of heard us go around the board. If not, it's been an hour, so let's, does somebody want to make a motion that we go into closed session?
I'll make a
We're
motion
going to
go
be
into
discussing
closed session.
compensation for a possible internal candidate.